Well, hello, podcast universe, and hello, Mariah.
Hey, Monique.
I am really excited to talk about today's episode. Today's episode we've called Space and Grace. And this kind of came out of my own inner strugglings with relationships with others, relationships with like friends, partners, and even myself. And I'm really excited to share this concept of space and grace with our listeners today so that maybe they can kind of glean some sort of understanding about how and why space and grace may be necessary in a relationship. So if you hang on with us today, you're going to understand what it is, and then we're going to tell you like how to potentially use it maybe, and then maybe you'll be able to determine if it's best for you, or maybe you need to activate space and grace in some of your relationships. So how's that sound?
That sounds wonderful.
Great.
I think this is going to be an excellent topic, and without a doubt, anytime I've paused on something and given some grace, I feel like the outcome has been better. So learning how to do that from you today is going to be amazing.
Okay, well, let's get started.
Welcome to Heart and Soul, the podcast where we empower and inspire women to lead their best lives, harnessing the power of their hearts and souls. We are Mariah
And Monique,
your hosts and guides on this journey of self-discovery and personal growth.
In each episode, we will dive deep into topics that matter most to you, from self-love and confidence to career development, relationships, and everything in between. We believe that every woman has a unique strength and inner wisdom waiting to be unleashed.
Join us as we cover insightful heart and soul-centered topics and interview incredible women who've overcome challenges, chased their dreams, and found their true purpose. Through all of this, you will discover practical tips, strategies, and real-life stories to help you navigate life's twists and turns.
For whatever season of life you're in, this podcast is your safe space to explore, learn, grow, and possibly even laugh and cry with us. So grab your headphones, maybe your favorite drink, and we'll embark on this transformative journey together.
With heart, I'm Mariah.
And with soul, I'm Monique.
today we're going to talk about space and grace. It's this concept of taking a pause, like you were saying, and maybe instead of getting frustrated or upset, giving grace. So it's at its basic form, that's really what it is. Taking some space, and then instead of jumping to conclusions or being angry, just giving a little bit of grace, right? So I just tell a little bit of a backstory.
Yeah.
I was struggling a while ago with a relationship with one of my girlfriends, and my girlfriend was really going through a challenging time. She was having a life change event going on, and I was feeling disconnected from her. I was feeling that she wasn't valuing our relationship as much as I was valuing hers. And I felt like there was like this push-pull, an unhealthy push-pull kind of going on. And this is not probably the first time she is not the only person that I had felt this way. I also had an ex-partner relationship where there was a lot of push-pull as well, and not a lot of like grace was given, a lot of jumping to conclusions, a lot of nitpicking, blah, blah, blah going on. And so I talked to a friend, and she was like, I just feel like everybody just needs some space and grace. And I was like, wait.
Say more.
I was like, wait, what's that? So we just kind of like talked about it. You and I have talked about it. And really what I was doing was I was jumping to a lot of conclusions with my friend, with my ex-partner. Even sometimes I do this with myself.
Jumping to conclusions is a thing. It's a thing. And it is like assuming things, right? That they're not real.
Right. Well, and really, what if that is real? But is it any of my business?
Right.
What if they don't like me anymore? Is it really any of my business? And also, do I know it to be true? Have they said, I don't like you anymore? Or maybe they're just going through something. So instead of, I was just running rampantly with a tape in my mind, like, there's this and this. I was falling so hard into my victim role of like, poor me. They don't like me. I'm not worthy. Trigger of all these wounds that I had that I thought I had like worked through. And I was just jumping to conclusions. And then, in true Monique form, I'm like, well, I'm just going to ghost her.
Right. You got angry
Yes.
and more vindictive
Yes.
than understanding.
And by the way, hadn't even actually talked to her about it.
It was all manufactured based on what you were interpreting.
Yeah, sensing, feeling. And then also, I will say, being an intuitive person like you are, I am also an intuitive person. I'm like, well, I know this. This is so
You were
true.
sure.
Right?
You were sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So I sat with this when my friend kind of like was like, how about if you just did this? I sat with this and I was like, whoa. I have gone down and spiraled so far down the rabbit hole of what I'm certain, 100% how things are, even though no one's told me that that's what they are, and even though no one said that's what they are, that I'm putting so much space and distance between us. I'm putting like resentment, I'm putting bitterness, and this is all, by the way, on me only.
Right.
And I'm not even like just acknowledging that we all sometimes go through hard times. I know this. I've done this.
Yeah.
And sometimes we just need a little bit of time. Everyone processes so differently. And also, chapters close, people move on. And what is the deal? Why do I need to be that person? Right?
Yeah.
So this concept of space and grace, it's kind of where this was born from.
Yeah. I can think of so many times when the spiral starts, and what needs to happen is just stop.
Yes.
Focus on yourself.
Yes.
Give them some space.
Yes.
And give them some grace that it's not about you.
Mm-hmm.
If it is about you, hopefully that will come back around to inform you of that fact. But that's not going to happen if you are creating an energetic wall between you that says,
so true.
Now I have issues with you.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
So it's like an energetic exchange is happening, and all of a sudden you change a dynamic that isn't about you into something that is.
Yes.
And now you're creating a distance that isn't welcomed.
Right.
But just pause.
Yes. Yes.
Just give it some time.
It seemed like to me I was manufacturing unnecessarily drama.
Yeah. We all do that.
Right. I was, I feel like all of us, narcissism is a huge term.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point I'd love to do a episode.
Yeah.
Chapter book, episode on narcissism, because I think it's like a buzzword given our current
I think
climate.
I think that it is. It's become something people are aware of.
Yes.
But within all of us, there's some element of it.
Yes. So a narcissist is like a personality disorder.
Yeah.
But when I've read like what, the stages or what the classifications for a narcissist are, there were some things like thinks everything's about me. I was like, oh my God. I literally was taking whatever was happening and making it about me. Right? Like my friend's distance, my friend's whatever, and making it about me. And it wasn't necessarily about me. And then I was like, oh my God, maybe I'm being a narcissist. It sent me on this self-inquiry discovery a little bit to kind of like know more about myself, and also to just not be so self-centered.
Yeah.
But I had to take a pause, a little bit of space.
Someone had to tell you, like, and thanks to your friend who pointed it out, 'cause
Right.
that's not easy to do, and that you received that well.
Yes.
And actually jolted something within you to reflect on, oh, wait a minute, you're right. Because what was the outcome? How did giving that space and grace pan out?
Right. Yes, I will get to that. But one thing I want to say is I called her because I was ready to go to war.
Oh.
So I was like, okay, I've given her the space she wanted. Right. And she's like, but what about grace? Right.
Uh-huh.
Like, because-
Space without grace,
Right, because I was
not the
like-
same thing.
Right. So I was like, I'm ready to go after her to like find out what's really happening. And I guess if this ruins the relationship that I've had for like 15, 20 years, whatever, so be it. Yeah. But then she said the word grace and I was like, oh,
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm a compassionate person. And I have had people give me grace because I have had moments where I'm not my most shiny star.
Yeah.
And then, so I was like, okay, I can give space and I can also lean into giving grace. And when I was like, we're giving grace here, it was almost like the energy of the word grace.
Shifted.
Yes. Shifted that. It felt like I had like this manic energy of like, well, blah, 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 like drama, right?
Mm.
And it was like when we accept and bring in grace, it was like, oh, okay. It's not that I'm saying it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
It matters.
Yeah.
It was hurtful, right? But, well, how I was taking it was hurtful. But if I can give grace and say, maybe they're not at their most shiny star right now.
Yeah.
Maybe they're not at their best place. Can I assume good intent
Yeah.
instead of assuming poor intent? And that for me was really helpful for like the step 2. If step 1 is pause, you're about to go to war with someone, emotional, or, you know, you're about to throw down the gauntlet and be like, let's fight, you know?
Yeah.
I remember when my kids were young and they would both walk in the room and they'd be like, take their shirts off and go like, let's go.
Yeah.
I was going to do it.
Yeah.
But if you can like back up, keep my shirt on,
Keep your shirt on.
not bump my chest. And, okay, not only are we pausing, but we're going to say, what about just grace here? I felt just, it allowed compassion, but it's more than compassion. It's probably more like the trajectory of the relationship shifted with my ability to give grace.
Yeah. And it didn't even have to, you didn't even have to do anything to
Right.
demonstrate that you gave grace. It was within your own mind
Yes.
that you allowed it to be okay.
Yeah.
And to say, I can let my ego stand back on this. That's really what grace is in this moment,
Yes.
right?
It's such a good way of
It's you
saying it.
quieting your ego to
Mhm.
say, you know what? Pipe down over there.
Yeah.
Hold off. It might not be about you. And so energetically, you gave that grace, which probably then made any future interactions better, which then made her more interested in leaning on you as someone in her life, which then brought you back into, I can only
Yes,
imagine
yes.
how this played out.
Yes.
And there wasn't even anything you actually had to do.
Right.
It was with all contained within yourself.
Right. It was an internal narrative dialogue shift, right? Or perspective shift, really.
Yep.
Because the space part was me just saying, okay, pause. Don't start, don't say, don't do, just, which in our culture, I feel like sometimes we're so like, respond, right? Right.
Oh,
We don't.
yeah. Like fast food culture, man. Like,
Right.
we need it now.
Right. We all want responses now. We want to be quick-witted. We want to
Yeah.
give our feedback and, not leave people hanging. And I think that's good. But maybe when you're talking about when people are shifting and going through a lot of transition, maybe that's not the best tact, right?
Mhm.
Unless they are asking for it or needing it, which was not exactly what was going on. So then the grace piece was, it was like, oh, and I feel like grace is something that's palpable when you bring in that energy, right? You've been
Yeah.
in situations
Mhm.
where there's a lot of tension and someone just brings in presence. And it's just like everybody just kind of is like, whoa.
And it's the difference between coming into the situation and asking, what's wrong with you? Versus, can I help? How can I
Yes.
help?
Yes.
So versus you going, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with me?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
You are going, how can I help? What do you need? And offering versus assuming.
Yes.
That's a major shift that if you can allow yourself to be that vulnerable,
Yes.
because that's a very vulnerable place to
Yes.
be in,
Yes.
then you can actually break through what the blockage
Right.
was there to begin with.
And to be honest, in this situation, I didn't even have to do that. I feel like once I kind of just let grace exist between us,
Yeah.
things just melted away. My own internal dramas melted away. We reconnected. There was a lot of talking about where they were at. And really and truly, I was like, oh, I understand.
Yeah, you actually could relate.
Yeah, here's me thinking it's all about me. And it's like, they got their own shit sandwich they're dealing with right now.
Yeah.
And then it was just like, okay, if I don't see her for a couple months, talk to her, it's going to be okay.
I think this particularly is valuable information or something to think about in long relationships too.
Yes.
Because if history has shown you that you've weathered, a lot of time and space
Yeah.
and life, that this is probably an anomaly.
Mm-hmm.
But it's often those relationships that we are so enmeshed in because they have been long, or maybe they're our family, right? That it's hardest to give that grace and space.
Yes.
It's the one you expect most to be good all the time.
Right.
Right. And that you have come to lean on or count
Yes.
on. And so when it's not there for you,
Yeah,
it's a
you're
problem.
like, yeah, you're upset about it.
And that you have a stronger reaction than to someone you know a lot less well. Right.
Yes. Very good point.
However, they deserve it more than anyone. The people
You're
that
right.
have been in your lives the longest and have been there through so many seasons, like if you can't give them grace and space,
Yes.
there's something amok. And so being reminded, like, if the people are closest to you deserve that more than anybody else.
I love that. That is such a good point.
Yeah.
And I would say also, I mean, parts of me, my old parts that had been triggered because I had been through a bad breakup where space was asked of me, and here come to find out, they were stepping out of the relationship, right?
Right.
So
Right.
for me, I was like, well, I'm being replaced. That's where my brain went. So I had to actually
past
work
trauma.
Right. I had to work through my own internal process as well. Like, this is not that. I don't know these facts to be true, even though I think they're true. So I want to just ask you,
Yeah.
have you ever used this, or can you think of an area in your life right now even where
Mhm.
where space and grace might be good that you'd like to share about, or where you'd like to use it?
Yeah. Oh, it's ever present. And I think about it from the angle of being a business owner
Okay.
and an employer.
Yes, I want to hear this.
And having employees, it's a very different relationship.
Yes.
Right. And many of our listeners, I think, are probably, small
Business
business owners and
owners.
entrepreneurs themselves, or maybe they manage people. And it's this push and pull between investing in somebody, putting your heart and soul into them, depending on them, and then the free agency of at any point that relationship can shift
Yes.
and change
Yes.
and end. And so I always have had to learn, or I've had to learn over the years that, like, it isn't about me in the end. I have to be able to stand in, like,
Even though you are the boss and it really is about you,
it's obviously have a
but
role.
not personal. Yes.
Yeah. And so where I've been able to lean into grace and space has been really helpful in processing through those types of transitions or relationships. So I think, just from a relationship perspective, I can see it there. Stepping back, giving space around, my prejudgment,
Yes.
my immediate storytelling in my mind about what's going on or what has transpired or what it had anything to really do with anything within my control. And then giving grace to say, well, maybe somebody just hadn't learned that lesson yet, or maybe, I don't know what's going on in all parts of their life.
Right.
And so being able to have that conversation with myself allows me to move on faster. And in business, the faster you can move on,
no kidding. You can't get
and
stuck.
get back to work,
Yeah.
the better. And that's what I've had to learn over time. In the past, in my early career, if I had somebody leave, oh man, I took it so hard and I personalized it.
Yes.
I made my own bad moves around what happened next. And so now when they have those transitions, I'm able to more clearly just give it space, offer grace, and quickly move on.
Yeah.
So that one is top of mind. And in my marriage.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And what I've learned recently is to ask for space. So that's
I
been
love
actually
this.
really helpful.
I have struggled with this
Mhm.
myself, right? Asking for my needs to be met.
So
Because you don't want to make it seem as a rejection.
Right.
Mhm.
Like I know it's what I need, but I need to communicate that to my partner so it's not taken as creating a distance that is then having them think something else is wrong,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
It's like communicating, I'm going to give you space, or I need you to give me space.
Yes.
And so that has been really helpful of being able to articulate that. So I had recently, and I credit, couples therapy for helping with that, because it was like being able to articulate that escalating an argument it clearly doesn't work. So what else? What are our other options? And for me, it's like, I just need space. It's not even very much space. It doesn't.
Yeah, it could be 15 minutes, an hour a day, whatever.
Right. Because my reaction without that is defensive and not the best version and triggering, right?
Okay.
But if I've had the space to collect my thoughts
and give yourself some grace,
to give myself grace,
Yes.
to see this for what it really is and not just come out swinging, I can come back to that conversation as a much better participant.
maybe you're a wiser person, right? Versus
Yeah.
emotionally charged person.
Exactly. I'm operating out a different part of my brain, and I'm not operating out of fight or flight.
Right.
And so I've been able to use that language to say, like, that version of me is a cornered wild animal.
Yeah. Right. Like you're a little lion.
Yeah. I'm literally tapping into the oldest part of my brain.
Yeah. The survival. Yes.
And it's not pretty. And I can imagine it hurts.
Yeah.
Right? Like
Right.
things get said.
Yeah.
It's ugly. But if I can step aside, and not everybody needs this, right? Just from like how they're raised, how they process
Mm-hmm.
conflict.
Mm-hmm.
But I could recognize within myself that I needed a minute to compose myself. And then I could come back to that conversation. And I don't think that's rare. I think that's pretty common that
I think you're right.
we need that. And it doesn't mean it's not abandonment. It's not
Rejection.
Rejection.
Right.
It's let me process this so that I can come back to the table, giving us both more grace. And through that space, like maybe have some epiphanies that will be better. And that was hard to figure out. It's what I wasn't asking for.
Mm-hmm.
And that my partner didn't feel rejected.
Right.
Or your friend doesn't feel rejected.
Right.
Or
Right.
your employee doesn't feel rejected. Like whatever that relationship is. So that's
Right.
it's like an important part of it is the communication of like, I'm going to give you some space and some grace. Or, you know what I need right now? And so I feel like I'm on a tangent, but one thing I have been really adamant about, and I would love to cover this in a future episode, is ask for what you need.
Oh my God. Yes. Preach. Yes. Well, so many of us don't. And
Oh
here
my
we
God.
are, fully functioning, high functioning human beings, getting what we need, but in our intimate relationships, not asking for what we need because we're afraid.
The fear and the shame around asking for help is
Yes.
absolutely ridiculous.
Yes.
And so pause on that. We will cover that in the next episode. I can already tell. But yeah, so it's like that grace and space can go two ways. You can grant it or you can ask for it.
Right.
And both of
Love
those
it.
are totally acceptable.
Yes. And you can give it to yourself. You know what I mean? Like some people push, go, do. And then they crash and burn. You know, we
Mhm.
talked about the burnout cycle, and they never really give themselves any space because maybe, like you said, family of origin, how they were raised. And also it's important too to realize, I feel like in relationship, everyone's way of operating is so different. So you're going to think like, well, surely they would know. No, not necessarily. Your fact, you might be pursuing them and they might be like, God, they're after me and I just need space. Or you might be giving them space and then they're starting to pursue you because they feel they're abandoning. You know what I mean? So it's just like a whole push-pull vicious cycle sort of thing.
The only way you can ever be clear on what somebody actually wants or needs is if they share it with you.
Yes.
Otherwise, we're just guessing
Yes.
and assuming.
Yes.
So I think using this as a tool in multifaceted tool
Yes.
can be a ticket to just improved relationships all across the board.
Yes.
And if life is nothing if not relationships.
Oh my gosh. We are born with other people. We are tribal in nature. If we were meant to be here by ourselves, we would be born to this planet by ourselves. So when people are like, well, people just need to figure it out, it's like, wouldn't you be one of those people? But whatever.
Yeah, we're all part of it.
Yes.
We're all part of the equation.
Yes.
So as we sort of summarize for a listener, what do you take away from this episode?
Yeah. So I want people to understand, like, if you're experiencing a lot of tension maybe in a relationship and you're, and this could even be in a relationship with yourself, and your kind of like go-to is to do more. Because I'm an overdoer, overfunctioner.
Yeah.
Maybe, and it's just not going well, and all good intentions by you are in place. Maybe it's time for a little space. Maybe it's time for a little pause. Try it, right? You don't have to pause forever, but try it.
Take a day.
Yeah, just to even take a day. And then if that, the pause, and sometimes for us people who are overfunctioners or overdoers, we get anxious or we completely continue to build the stories.
Mm-hmm.
So then the grace piece is so important, because then you can say like, but I'm going to assume good intent. I'm going to give grace here and assume that they don't mean to be hurtful. They don't mean to be spiteful. Because I truly believe the majority of people don't mean to be hurtful or spiteful.
It's not our default mode.
No, I don't believe that. No, there are some people who hurt people, and there's various versions of that. But so if you're really experiencing some, clashing with someone, try giving space, but then activating the energy of grace, and then maybe just see how you feel. Because it's really about, I use this a lot in my coaching, is like, what is the thing that's in the way of you experiencing just joy all the time? Like, is it that, what keeps you up at night? Is it that I can't pay my bills? Is it that my relationship with my kids is going poorly? What is it? Can you take a little bit of a pause and be like, and assume good intent? Like it's going to all work out. And you can, and I'm not saying lie to yourself, but I'm saying like, can you just give yourself a moment of joy and peace and take that pause, have that grace? And then you kind of can come back at it, not so emotionally charged. And maybe you have like this wiser wisdom place where you can, or an intuitive place where you can then see kind of like the forest through the trees, where before you're just like, it's like a jungle in here, whatever. Yeah. Right. So I would say if that's where you're at, try it and see how it works. I'm curious to hear back from our listeners if they like this concept, if they've tried this concept, if this concept is just like out into the stratosphere. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about it?
Well, I think it really rolls off the tongue nicely.
Space and grace.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like,
it does.
It can be something that you can say to yourself when you hit that situation or confront that person. Space and grace, right? Like you can be an inner narrative that just reminds you of some tools that you have in your toolbox. So I think I can't imagine anybody listening doesn't see some ways in which this could be helpful. So I hope that it only opens up ideas of how you can use it in your relationship with yourself. Love that. 100% starts there. Your relationship with your romantic partners, your children, your employees, your family. Try it. What do you got to lose?
Yeah. You've been doing it one way for so long.
That's not working.
Right.
I'm going to say give this a shot.
Right.
So take that pause, have some grace, don't assume ill intent, and see what happens next. Allow it to move on from there.
I love it.
Wonderful. Well, I'm excited to hear from our listeners via our Instagram page, or you could always, reach out to us through our website as well. Was this helpful?
Yes.
And can you share with us any times when you've used space and grace to better a relationship in the end?
Or even like, how could you use it now going forward in the future? Maybe we introduced it to you and you're like, I could try this out. I'm curious. So yeah, please share.
It's been another great episode. Thank you
Yes.
always, Monique, for being vulnerable and sharing your
Oh,
personal
same to
stories
you.
too.
Yeah, same to you. All right. Until next time, thank you for joining us.
Cheers, friends. You've just finished another episode of the Heart and Soul podcast. We hope that you've enjoyed the show, and if you loved it, we would love if you'd leave us a 5-star review on whatever platform you're listening. You can find links to leave that review in the show notes, where you'll also find other resources that we reference on our show. And if you think a friend could find value in today's episode or any future episodes, please share this episode with them on social media. This is one of the only ways the podcast can organically grow, and we just can't wait to connect with you and all of your besties. You can also find Monique and I on our many social media platforms or our websites, and we're going to leave links to those in the show notes as well. Thank you for listening. We look forward to sharing our hearts and souls with you again next time. With Heart, I'm Mariah.
And with Soul, I'm Monique.